So, Ricky, y'all can go live from your time, Khalil. It's going to be an interesting one.
Thank you, Minister Abrams. Comrades, good afternoon. I want to start by saying, in the first place, that, I was told that the Young Socialists were not going to be required anymore to speak, but it is a testament to the commitment of the Barbados Labour Party that on an afternoon, as you are all aware, as important as this one, in the context of the last 2 days, that the Barbados Labour Party still feels it important that the League of Young Socialists, young people, must be represented at a meeting such as this. And I start there to tell you that, and I know you will agree with me, that the commitment of the Barbados Labour Party to its values, whether that is to improving the life of young people, whether that is generally to making a better life for our people, those are values from which the Labour Party will not shrink at any point in time. And I speak to you not only as a member of the League of Young Socialists, but also personally. I live not too far from here on the other side of the border, and I come and I see my good comrade and colleague Margot, I see comrade Sherlock, I see comrade Gus, I see comrade Dr. Dan, and I am gratified to see so many comrades today from the branch of the Barbados Labour Party of Christchurch South, because Christchurch South, as I'm sure you know, remains absolutely committed to the Barbados Labour Party. Because the Barbados Labour Party has never abandoned Christchurch South, and the people of Christchurch South will not abandon the Barbados Labour Party. The mission that this government is on, that your government led by our political leader and the Prime Minister of this country, is far too important a mission to allow the forces that are arrayed against this government to even be able to succeed. Yesterday, you saw people, I suppose, getting exercise in Bridgetown, taking what could only be described as a flight of fancy. Comrades, for too long in this country and around the world, people have taken to the internet, have used the anonymity of the internet to do what they want and to say what they want and to destroy the lives of people. What is a government supposed to do if it is not to protect the people who put them there? So that people who feel that they can get onto social media and they can put out intimate photographs of people without their consent, that they can groom or abuse children, that they can harass people, that they can bully people, this government has come to tell you not about here. And this government will not shrink from it, because there are people who have nothing else better to do than to stymie the progress of this government. Make no mistake about it. The democracy of Barbados today is stronger than it was before 2018. In this country, before 2021, the head of state of Barbados was a hereditary position. The Governor General was a person that was virtually handpicked by the Prime Minister. What did your Prime Minister and your government do? Not only did they make this country a republic, but the Prime Minister and the Parliament took away from the Prime Minister the sole right to choose the Governor General, so that now it is the Parliament of Barbados that elects the head of state of this country. The Prime Minister has taken from herself the power solely to appoint judges. Your Prime Minister, how many other leaders in the world every month sit down with their ministers and with their technocrats and present themselves to the people who they represent and respond to the questions that they have. Comrades, what we are fighting in this country are huge international headwinds. The last thing that we can afford at the national level is the kind of irresponsible conduct that you see, for example, with the opposition to the cybercrime bill and other things. People have a right to say things. I will never say that. People have a right to say what they want. If you want to march, you go and march. We march too. But all I'm saying to you, please, and this is me speaking, if you're going to march about something that makes sense. This government, if you read, and a lot of people talking have not read the bill, or either they have read the bill but they haven't understood it, does not propose to impose any kind of dictatorial state in this country, but that it creates in cyberspace offenses, for example, that exist in real life. The Minor Offences Act, and I'm not an attorney at this time, but Minister Abrams can tell you, the Minor Offences Act prohibits a person in a public place, including a beach, from harassing somebody. The meaning of words like harass, like subject somebody to ridicule, subject somebody to embarrassment, these are expressions and phrases that the law understands what they mean. So you can't just send a message to somebody, Saitomi send a message and say that Kochtawala get her real fat, and then she can get locked up for that. That doesn't make any sense, comrades. That is not how the law operates, not in a country with an established democracy like this. You know, the other day the Dems had a meeting. I think the theme of the meeting was, where the money gone? It was a very interesting question, and I think it's a very appropriate question too. Because if, comrades, you look at the level of national debt in 2008, and you look at the level of national debt in 2018, there was a great and an appreciable increase during the period that the Democratic Labour Party was in office, I think in the order of $6 billion. Comrades, can you tell me one thing that you saw for $6 billion worth of debt? Is there a single thing that you can point to in 10 years from $6 billion in debt that was added by the Dems that you could see in this country? What you got for, sorry? What you got instead was a broken sewage system. What you got were young people whose opportunities were taken away. What you got were no buses. The Democratic Labour Party pioneered an economics whereby they borrowed more and got less. This government found debt in the order of $18 billion in 2018. And by the last statistics I saw, debt today is about $14 billion. Now, comrades, I study laws, many of you know, but I did general maths at CSEC level. I did advanced math too, so I know one or two things about math. But to my mind and to my thinking, I could be wrong and you can correct me. To me, 18 is more than 14, and 14 is less than 18. But, well, as my comrade reminds me, sometimes the Dems have a little bit of difficulty with math. So where has the money gone? The money has gone, well, first, there's now less debt today, total government debt, public debt, than there was in 2018. But you can look around and see what the government has done through economic. This country faced devaluation. Didn't happen, though, because this government got into office at the right time. And you can look and you can see what this government has done in the last, coming up soon to 6 years. You can see the challenges that this country has weathered, but you can equally see how this government and the political party to which we are all so proud to associate ourselves delivered for you. So that young people like myself who go to the University of the West Indies have now the ability to continue to do that so that they can lift their families up in this country. Because this country faced, as I told you, an almost devaluation. We faced a pandemic. We faced the ravages of war all over the world. But what did your government do? It went to Parliament every year and made sure that there was money to pay for your children to go to school. Because priorities matter. And priorities are informed by values. So you know what the Democratic Labour Party does when they go and get stuff. When they go and get stuff, all of us suffer. But that when this party is in power and we face the tough times that we face, there are hardships, comrades, and we all know it. All over the world we are facing hardships. But that as far as possible, this government and this political party has done all that it can to ensure that, in the words of the Prime Minister, the burden is shared so that when there is bounty, that too can be shared, as has happened repeatedly over the course of the life of this government. And so we cannot allow ourselves at any time to be disheartened, to be downhearted, or to be distracted by those who traffic in the politics of division, those who traffic in the politics of discord, and those who wish to traffic only in making this country not reach its full potential for their own gain. You, like me, comrades, feel, I know, a sense of attachment to this great political party. And I want to talk to you all in here today as comrades all. When we see the kinds of attacks that are being mounted against our comrades, because that is what they are. Minister Wilfred Abrams is the Honorable Wilfred Abrams and the member for Christchurch East, but Mr. Wilfred Abrams, I know, will agree that he is our comrade. And when Comrade Wilfred Abrams is assaulted verbally and otherwise on the internet, or when Comrade McConney or any member of this party, it falls to the faithful of the Labour Party to get up and say, no, we will not stand by and let you do that. And frankly, we have to do a better job of that, and I'm going to be very straight on with that. We have to do a better job of that because the others are surprisingly keeping it together at this point to come after us. And so if you want the Dems to return to power, then we have to sit down and do nothing. But if, like me, you fear that prospect, and if, like me, you know that that will spell the death knell of Barbados, then we have to do everything that we can within the bounds of the law to protect our ministers, the members of the parliamentary party, and indeed the party. Because when the Barbados Labour Party is in office, you know that Barbados does well. We cannot lose sight of the mission at this point in time. The mission of the Barbados Labour Party you have seen over the last 85 plus years, and you see it in the last 6 years. The party has come very simply to make a better life for our people. It doesn't matter whether people come or go, the party and the mission remains the same. From time to time, if people don't subscribe to the mission, then they go their way. There's nothing, people have freedom of action. But those who remain committed to you, and we remain certainly committed to the Barbados Labour Party. Comrades, I only had a short time with you today. As I said, we weren't expecting to speak, but the League of Young Socialists appreciate the opportunity at this juncture to make these few remarks to you on behalf of our president, Comrade Roshana Trim, who I apologize for her absence. She's overseas. But the League of Young Socialists remains a committed part of the Barbados Labour Party, and I encourage all of us to stand up and to fight with our honourable ministers. Thank you.
Come on, we could do better than that. We could do better than that. I just want to do an excuse for Minister Lisa Cummings. I know you all see her here, but Lisa dragged me off to speak at something yesterday. She told me it was for 20 minutes, and I ended up being there for 4 hours. And her voice was going then, and she wouldn't stop speaking. So committed was she to the cause that she started off here, and by the time she was finished, you could barely hear her. No, you can't hear her at all. So she was on the slate to speak, but I think we can cut her some slack today. What do you think? Yes? Okay, Corinne, can you please introduce Minister McConney? Thanks.
Good evening, comrades. It is my honor to introduce the featured speaker, Ms. Kay McConney. I knew her for more years than either of us can remember. At Queen's College, I was her form teacher. I think it was in 5 Alpha, okay? In 5 Alpha, and I also taught her history. I'm pleased to say that she got a grade 1 in history. At QC, Kay was an outstanding athlete, and she blew away the competition at inter-school sports. Comrade Kay won silver medals in the 100-meter hurdles at the 1982 Central American and Caribbean Championships and the 1983 Caribbean Games. She was awarded an athletic scholarship at the age of 16 and became the youngest student athlete at the time to enroll at Eastern Michigan University. Kay, a Barbadian. Let's congratulate her on that. Graduating with honors in international trade, she secured an MBA in international business and represented her country with distinction as Barbados' top diplomat in Toronto. Described by She magazine as a dynamo moving the region forward, Comrade Kay used her talents to champion the interests of Barbados, the Caribbean, and small, vulnerable economies internationally. Her distinguished service extended to international diplomacy, international development, and international trade. She served as a high-level diplomat at the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland, and as trade negotiator at the World Trade Organization. As an international development consultant, Comrade Kay worked with the economic community of the West African states. She was published by the European Commission. She served as an expert and held consultancies for international development programs. Her clients included the United States AID and the UNDP. Comrade Kay was the youngest Consul General to be appointed by Barbados, and she blazed trails in Canada as Dean of the Caribbean Community Consular Corps, piloting initiatives to improve literacy in the region. For over 2 decades, Comrade Kay has been a champion for entrepreneurship development in the region. She has collaborated on enterprise and youth initiatives sponsored by the Organization of American States. And in 2016, she was given an award for leadership by the Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme. In 2018, Comrade Kay was appointed by the Prime Minister of Barbados to serve as President of the Senate and as Minister of Innovation, Science, and Smart Technology. She served with distinction in both those positions, digitizing many government departments and arming them with the technology to improve their efficiency and productivity. In 2018, she successfully contested the general elections and won a seat in the House to represent St. Philip West. She currently serves as the Minister of Education, Technological, and Vocational Training. In that capacity, Comrade Kay is spearheading the education transformation process, and that is one of the most visionary projects to come out of the Ministry of Education since EduTech 2000. She is passionate about seeing all students achieve their full potential and strongly believes that technical and vocational education can become a major income earner in Barbados. Indeed, only last week, she spoke at the launch of a degree program for gaming and animation at the Barbados Community College. Ladies and gentlemen, comrades all, I introduce you to our guest speaker, my past student, my comrade, and my dear friend, Kay McConney.
Thank you so much. I knew you as Miss Kennedy. I will call you that. I come here this evening, comrades, as a happy member of the Barbados Labour Party who ain't going nowhere. And I have been invited to speak on education transformation. And you know, all I can say is Jimmy Cliff is my man today. Man, it's a hard road to travel and a rough, rough way to go. But we ain't turning back, because our heart is fixed. Our mind is made up, and we'll never stop. And the faith of the Barbados Labour Party and the people of Barbados will see us through. And so I start with education transformation. As you know, the tides change in the last little while since the poster went out. So you know your time get cut. So I am saying to you, in the short period that I have here, I just want to bring you up to date quickly on what is happening with education transformation and what's happening right here at St. Christopher Primary for the people of Christchurch East. And I also want to give you just a little taste for those. I know there are some young people. We had asked Minister Abrams and his team to invite people who were interested in the AI, the artificial intelligence training. The plan today was that we were bringing people from the Student Revolving Loan Fund who would sign you up on the spot for those who were interested. But things have changed, and that's a good thing. So what I'm going to do is give you just a taste of it. I have my assistant here, Amber, who is standing right in the back for those people who have young people who are interested in joining the training. She is taking names, and we will follow up to make sure they get what they need. But let us start with education transformation. How many of you in here left school back in the 80s? Just put your hand quickly and put it back down. How many in the 70s? How many in the 60s? What? How many in the 90s? My goodness. And 2000s. And I think that's nearly every hand. The bottom line is, for those who left in the 1980s and 1990s, is the world today the same as it was when you left school? But if the world is different, how could we be preparing our children in the same way we prepared you back in the 60s and 70s and 80s? We have to prepare our children for the world they are facing now and the one to come. And that means that the work that we have to do in education transformation is not about tinkering with the system. Simply, it is about making sure that the way in which we do education will make sure that every single child who must now face the world as it is and as it is evolving, that they have a good chance at success in it. And so many of the transformation proposals that we put out there, we not only had the conversations with many of the stakeholders in education. You've heard me mention them before, and I don't know if you want me to mention them again, but I think you know who they are. It is with the teachers, with the parents, with the students, with the unions, with auxiliary staff, with the Ministry of Education, with a whole range of stakeholders. We had the conversation. And then you'll remember we have public consultations. So we went from stakeholder consultations to public, where you throw it open to all. And we had several of those consultations that concluded in November of last year. So let me tell you what we're doing now, because some people say, but I ain't hearing anything. What is going on? So let me tell you what is going on. What we did is we look at what was proposed when that came out of all those Reimagine education consultations we had with stakeholders. We then looked at, coming out of all those consultations, things you sent in by email, things you sent in via social media, feedback that you sent in at the live public events. Every different way in which you sent us information, we curated all of that information. And what we now have is, okay, this is what had been proposed. Here is the feedback that came. And as recently as Friday just gone, we continue to have people in the ministry now look at what was recommended and do our own analysis, because what we will come out with now is, given the fact that we heard you, given the analysis we have done on the recommendations that were made, now here is what we are going to propose going forward. Then we come back to you with that, so that you know. So it isn't that we have stopped, it is that we are taking the time to listen, to pull together all the feedback, to do the analysis on some of the recommendations that were made, and there were some excellent recommendations that came from the public. And we are doing the internal work now, so that when we come up with, this is what was proposed, this is what the public said, and here now is the analysis and what we are recommending, that we're able to do so in a matter that is complete. But I want to share a few things with you only, which will be an important part of the things we are considering now, and that are an important part of us going forward. At the pre-primary level, one of the things we have to do with regards to education transformation is make sure we make a solid foundation. Because some of the problems we are seeing happening at secondary school, if we are able to build a stronger foundation, it will head off some of those problems with the children going into the secondary schools. And so what we are seeking to do is, even at the pre-primary, what you would call the nursery level, we are trying to make sure now that in Barbados, it is age 5 to 16 that is mandatory for people to be in school. And the government provides that education free of charge. We are now seeking, as part of building a stronger foundation, to extend that pre-primary age from 3 to 16. That is what is being proposed. And we are now working on how we might be able to make that happen. And you know why? Because what we found coming into the primary school system is that those parents who had the wherewithal to send their child to a nursery school, and that nursery school had a structured program, when that child now gets from nursery into the primary school system around 5-ish, what was happening is that some had a head start on the others. And we weren't always able to address some of those challenges as early on. What now we want to do is make sure that every child has a fighting chance. And therefore, we think that at the age of 3 now, let us start opening it up. Opening the opportunities now for more people to be able to get their children through nursery, so that by the time they hit primary and that more structured way of doing school, that we have prepared them with a play-based curriculum, that they already start to learn that, you know what, learning is fun. And that we have started to get them ready for more formal education. There's more at that level, but I don't have enough time. That is the big thing at the pre-primary level or that nursery level. At the primary school level, we recognize that we have a lot of problems with literacy and numeracy. And so what has been proposed, and in fact it was teachers who proposed it, is that we strengthen the support in primary school to help children learn and to help children be able to do numeracy, literacy and numeracy. That is one of the important things you may see, that there's additional support for that at the primary level. You will also see that we are seeking to introduce more competency-based learning. What does that mean? That it isn't only about what the children know, but it is now providing opportunity for them to actually apply it. And that the whole approach of technical and vocational that will allow the children to not only know, but show how they will use the knowledge they have, and show that they're competent in using the knowledge. That is another one of the important things we're proposing at secondary. Now, I know a whole lot of people really want to know what happened into the common entrance. As I said, it was as recent as Friday that we were still in final discussions, and the intention, we have created a group of, I would say, the Prime Minister. This was the Prime Minister's initiative, an excellent initiative, where she has brought together a group of elders, which are those people who have done education and have been part of the groundsel of education in this country, and they have helped us to be who we are today as an outstanding country in education. The Prime Minister has brought together a number of those elders, and so we have their counsel. And when we have finished at the ministry, many of those things we might want to recommend, given the feedback from the public, will go to the Council of Elders. And in those elders then, we will then make those decisions. So what will happen to your common entrance? I have some suspicions based on the feedback we have received, but I am not in a position now to tell you that definitively that time will come. Everything in the fullness of time. There are those who are wondering what will happen at secondary school. Again, as I have said, we are internally doing the analysis. We had a lot of good feedback again from the public as to how we can do secondary school. Do we split it into two or do we keep it in one? Right now, we have one system where you just go straight from first form all the way to 6 in many cases. What was proposed was that you have some junior academies of excellence and some senior academies of excellence. But right now, we have received about 3 or 4 different proposals as to how we may be able to make that happen. And once we get that settled, we will then come to the public with that. So with regards to St. Christopher Primary, some of the work that we are doing is with special needs. And in fact, this school is one of the leading schools in Barbados with regards to how it treats to students with special needs. There are 2 classes here as it relates to programs here working with students with autism. What we did is we recently refurbished the prefab that you have out there, and that is being used for remedial and other types of special needs that we have right here on the left-hand side. What is happening is the intention is that we will be able to put additional senior teacher in here that will provide the kind of support. But this is one of the schools, along with 4 others, that we have earmarked for special attention as it relates to students with special needs. And one of the things that you will see that St. Christopher is doing and doing well, it is that our strategy as it relates for students with special needs. And when I say special needs, you know what I mean? All right. And special needs, remember, can be gifted as well as remedial. It's on both ends of the spectrum. One of the things that St. Christopher is doing well is their work in inclusiveness. What do I mean by that? Oftentimes you will hear that you would take certain students who have certain challenges and put them outside the regular mainstream of the school. What St. Christopher is doing, as are many other schools in Barbados that is consistent with our strategy, is inclusion. Because every bit of research out there has told us that when you include students with special needs in the mainstream schools, they get better results. Their social skills develop better. And what it does, it creates a culture in the school where all children are able to see people who are different, and it develops their own tolerance. And that builds a better Barbados for all of us. So I am saying to you, St. Christopher is one of the schools doing good things. They will continue to get support, as are some of the other schools that we have identified, where we will be putting additional resources to support those students with special needs. And that means better diagnosis in terms of not guessing what is the problem with this child. They say, but this child ain't learning, but you don't understand why. Well, you need to do some diagnostics to find out what is the specific problem or challenge, I should say, the child is facing. And then you design a program to fit that particular challenge. And so additional support will be coming in that regard. Now, so we have talked about what's happening at pre-primary. We've talked a bit about what's happening at primary. We talked about secondary. We talked about what we're doing for special needs. I could continue with regards to education transformation, but I believe my time is going to be up in about 3-4 minutes. One of the things that we recognize we have to do with the schools is to look at the infrastructure, look at the buildings, look at the surroundings. And so you will notice there's some pictures that I have of some schools that are beginning to be transformed. And the intention now is that we have schools that are lighter, that are brighter, that are more climate resilient, that can really mitigate against the risk of disaster, that schools that are able to harvest water and reuse water, that are energy safe, and that look very different than the schools we've seen today. The truth is we can't do all 100 and something schools one time. But we are starting with some. And in some schools we can't do the whole building, but we can do parts of the building and over time build it out. Just recently, we were having a meeting with XQ, which is one of the partners, our international partners, who will be building new schools here in Barbados at the secondary level. This was on, I believe, Friday, I believe it was. And the new designs for what the schools could look like, they are exciting. It looks like something out of the 21st century. And so I know that when we have settled on the briefs, and the thing is, it isn't that we're bringing in people from outside to do our schools. That is not what is happening. What it is that they have built climate resilient schools around the world, and there's an expertise they're bringing to us. We are working with our local architects to be able to say, look, this is the brief for what a nursery school should have. This is a brief for what a primary school should have and look like. This is a brief for secondary. This is a brief for special needs. Now, you as architects, bring whatever aesthetic you like, however, as long as it fits these criteria that are part of the brief. That way, all schools have the same thing, even though they may look different. And even though they may be in different locations. So that's what we're working on. And I must say, Dr. Duguid, who is also a comrade here from our Christchurch family, he is working with us to ensure that we get those briefs right so that as we move on now, infrastructure will start to become a very important part of how we do education transformation. One of the things that we're proposing is that we do more collaborative work. There was a time when you and I have our desk right here, and you hide it, no one else is to see what we are writing. However, we're in a world where collaboration, where teamwork, where project-based work. How many of you work in places where you're the only one and you work with no one, have to communicate with no one, have to do nothing with anyone else? The world they are coming in this is the age of collaboration. And therefore, the kind of spaces that we create for students must be spaces that look very different than the classrooms Ms. Kennedy came out of in we will not call the number of the year that she came out, but we know it was before the 70s and it was probably before the 60s too. And so it is important that we recognize that part of the infrastructure is not just fixing what is wrong, but it's reimagining what school must look like and being able to create spaces that are suited to a 21st century version of schools. And the beautification, and this is the appeal that I'm going to make to Minister Abrams, to MP Abrams, and the entire team of Christchurch West. We will be doing beautification projects across all schools, and the Prime Minister's office has said they wish to sponsor a competition for the best, most beautiful school in Barbados. We are asking you to go to the community and recruit those persons who are interested in helping to work with the schools in the beautification project. Minister Ford, MP Ford, Comrade Adrian Ford is also working with our Ministry of Education to make this happen. But we need you here in Christchurch East and all those across Barbados to start putting your community teams together who will work with the schools, so that after we have done the beautification of those schools and you've worked with us, when the children go home during the holidays, the community still takes charge to make sure that we are maintaining and keeping things going. Part of what we are proposing with regards to where we go with primary and secondary is about giving the schools back to community. Many of you will remember that you went to primary school with people who lived in the same neighborhood as you. We have moved away from that. What will happen is that we intend that the schools be owned by the community, that those communities be able to go and use the school premises, that you help to maintain the school premises, that you take a stake in what education looks like in your community. And so that is part of the appeal that I'm making to you today. Join us in improving the way our schools look, the way our schools feel, by joining as community members in our beautification project. Please give your names to the Member of Parliament. You can give them to the Ministry of Education. Particularly, you can speak to ask for the Education Technical Management Unit, Ms. Ward, and we will be able to get you on board and to build those teams. I have to go now. However, I want to tell you, I don't know how many of you have seen the advertisements that have been out for us to train 2,000 people in artificial intelligence. Have you seen it? And there are others where there is training in cybersecurity. Just to share with you, for those who may be a little bit skeptical and not sure, last year we did some training for persons in cybersecurity. And it was an 8-month training, intensive, very intensive training. 100% of those people who successfully completed the program are working now at a minimum $5,000 per month. They're working, many of them, with the exception of 3 who was taken out of the island. The majority of those are working down the Harbor Road in one of the buildings down there. They're working from Barbados, but they're working for companies that are outside of Barbados. That is the future of work. And that's what I mean, that we must prepare our children that even if they stay locally, that they are globally ready for the opportunities that are out there. And the artificial intelligence training, which you saw going around, the deadline is closing. That training is due to start on March the 11th, I believe it is. So we need for you to sign up quickly. As I said, the plan was we would have had you sign up today, but please, just if you're interested, what this training is going to do is to help persons, show you how to train the artificial intelligence. You know, when you go on and you ask Google for something, it just pops up. It isn't a human being popping it up for you. It's the technology that is doing it. But what you have to do is train that technology. If not, it will spit out foolishness. And so what you're asking, what that training will do is to help to prepare persons for entry level at that stage, to help train the AI, help train artificial intelligence, and for other entry level positions. Now, this doesn't come in at the same level as the cybersecurity. The cybersecurity started everybody at a minimum $5,000 a month. This one starts you at a minimum $2,005 per month. Once you successfully complete it to the standards required. That, however, that training is just 3 months in length, and I believe the cost, which will be supported by the Student Revolving Loan Fund, is about $8,000 for the AI course. So I'm saying the cybersecurity course is about $24,000 and $11,000, and I believe then that we now have the opportunity to have people locally grounded, anchored in Barbados, but working for the world. That's what we mean by global citizens with Bajan values. On that note, I know I have overstayed my welcome, and this is the day and the evening for Christchurch MPs. I will get off your stage in Christchurch, but I hope you know I brought good news for St. Christopher Primary. I brought good news for Barbados, and we look forward to working with you. Remember, the road is rough, but we ain't turning back. Thank you.
Thank everyone. Thank you, Kay. That was special. I just want to acknowledge some persons who would have come in since we started. I want to acknowledge the CEO of the party, Patricia Paris, Senator Patricia Paris. I want to acknowledge former Senator and now Ambassador Lorenzo Harewood. Consul General, sorry. I want to acknowledge Senator Charles Morris. I want to acknowledge the President of the Senate, the Honorable Reginald Farley. I was going to acknowledge the matriarch of Christchurch South, Stella Lady St. John, but she has stepped out. But I want to acknowledge the fact that she was here, so to give her a round of applause as well. So, meet Reggie. Meet Maki. Our local hero, Maki Waldron. Junior Maki Waldron. And the irrepressible Wayne Cock, you know. So it gives me great pleasure, rolling right along, to introduce a good friend of mine. He is perhaps the most special person that has ever had a ministerial portfolio. And I mean that in every sense of the word. There is nobody like one, the Honorable Adrian Medic Ford. I ain't done yet. Now, Adrian is one of the most genuine people you will ever meet. Adrian calls it as he sees it. He does what he says he will do and does not do what he says he will not do. Adrian is a person who's responsible for perhaps one of the most successful of the government's program, one of the most obvious ones, the Clean and Green programs. You see it. You see the billboards everywhere, and you actually notice it because you would have seen a place that was formerly under bush that now has landscape lawns, it now has park benches, it now has foliage and plants. It was a special program. I want to particularly thank Adrian for all those who out here who live in Coverley or who traverse Coverley. We had the actually largest Clean and Green program in Coverley. They took the site of what was an old dump that was overgrown for years, and it is now a massive landscape area that the residents can use, children can play on, and that is all thanks to Adrian Medic Ford. Left to Adrian, we will save all the animals, preserve the centipedes, encourage the lizards, get rid of all chain link fence and put plants and hedges, right? But you know what? If that's his philosophy, we understand, because he is perhaps the best Minister of the Environment that we've ever had. So I wish to welcome my good friend, my constituent, the MP for Christchurch West Central, Christchurch West Central, Adrian Medic Ford.
Good evening, Christchurch East. Good evening, Christchurch East. I want to hear good evening from Christchurch East, man. And Wilfred, I want you to say and make a correction. It is not East Central or West Central, it's the omphalos of Christchurch. I represent the fulcrum of Christchurch, the heartbeat of Christchurch, Christchurch West Central. Ladies and gentlemen, I come here with a simple message today. And I want to hear Christchurch East people. I want to hear the whole of Christchurch today, because it is about you. Today is about Barbados. And we are in a situation, if we don't make serious decisions, then our lives are threatened. The lives of our children are threatened. The lives of the same biodiversity that Wilfred Abrams spoke about will be threatened. I am saying today is the day. It is a good day. It is the day that the Lord has made. Christchurch East. I don't want to really get serious, because Wilfred introduced me as probably the best Minister of Environment ever. And it was as the best. Best for me is the acronym for better every single time. And I try to be better every single time as I execute my mandate. But for Christchurch East, I want to say, Wilfred, you are the best MP in Christchurch East so far, who has graced this constituency. And sometimes, as I reflect on the words of Martin Luther King Jr., sometimes to go forward, you have to go back. And there's a saying in Barbados, an axiom that some of us like to use: Bajans got short memories. I want to say today that prior to 2018, this constituency was at a low ebb. I want to say that when you asked Wilfred, by giving him the vote to rescue, to restore and rebuild this constituency, and inadvertently Barbados, he put his hand up and said, count me in. I want to be the part of this process. I want to be a part of the rebuild of this Barbados. And the first order of the day, as Minister of Energy and Water Resources, was to get the sewage from the South Coast. I don't want you all to forget. I don't want us to forget the trip advisories that were coming our way that seek to trip up the social fabric of this country, and that Wilfred Abrams single-handedly went on a mission to clean up Barbados as it relates to the sewage in the South Coast. Don't let us forget that. Because we are seeing now streets where we are driving past, pristine environment, and we sometimes forget how we get there. I want us to remember that he was the first minister who started the procurement for the water trust so that Barbadians in rural Barbados can get a drop of water, the basis of life. I want you to remember your MP was the man behind that. I want you to remember, man, Christchurch East. I want you to remember, because sometimes we got short memories, man. I want you to remember that this same very MP here started with the transition to the green energy sector so that by 2030, we can not only acquiesce to a sustainable development goal to have renewable energy and fossil fuel-free environment, but so that our children and our children's children will be able to breathe clean, fresh air and able to survive the test of times. This man, Wilfred Abrams, did it all. I want you to remember that. And the journey has continued with my comrade, Lisa Cummins, minister now responsible, who have taken on the baton, running like the sprinter that just spoke before me. They told me she was a 200-meter sprinter. I won't try even to do the 100-meter. I want to say to you, your MP, Wilfred Abrams, and then we go a little further, because in 2022, you recognize he was the minister now responsible for the transformation that is going on at the government industrial school. The Child Justice Bill, so that children will have a stake in this country with a level of comfort. Your MP, Wilfred Abrams. I want you to also remember your MP, this same Wilfred Abrams, who said, count me in to be part of the rebuild of Barbados. Count me in to be part of the restoration of Barbados. Count me in to be part of the rescue effort of Barbados. This same very Wilfred Abrams decided that as part of the reform, that the prisoners in this country, albeit that they have run afoul of the law, that they must become part of the human element, and we must be able to be responsible for their basic needs. This man, Wilfred Abrams, your MP, I want you to put your hands together and lift him today, man. This is what representation is all about. And this representation doesn't only come from Wilfred Abrams and the Barbados Labour Party. It comes from every single MP. Every single one of us who, you understand, we are working with a prime minister who doesn't have a moment of rest. Every waking moment of her life, she dedicates for the interests of Barbadians. Every waking moment of her life, she spends looking after the basic needs of Barbadians. Every waking moment of her life, she has the interests of Barbadians dear to her heart. I know it. I know it, and I know all of you know it. The prime minister you have is one in a lifetime. It is like the good old tidal wave of change that will rise up once in a lifetime. And I want you to embrace and lift her with your spirit. I want you, not only the Barbados Labour Party, but all Barbadians to recognize that which you have so you can cherish it. Because there's another maxim that says, you know what you have. Thought you thought, so you told me. You know what you have, but you don't know what you can get. And based on what we are seeing and the horizon on the other side, what we can get will put us back in the path of disaster and destruction. That's what you will get. This is a serious time in our lives. And I want us to appreciate the fact that we have to harness that which we have. I want us to appreciate it. But then there's all this talk, idle talk, about travel and the foolishness that the Prime Minister traveling all the way. I call it idle talk. Some may call it ignorance on stilts. But it's real life ignorance when you're talking foolishness. Because the reality of it all, that for the first time in our history, Barbados as a small island development state is a leader in the world, man. For the first time, because of the Prime Minister and her work in the international sphere, a leader in the world. And every time you travel as a minister, the first question is asked, what will you get the Prime Minister from? We want her out here to help us. We Barbadians are so lucky. I have traveled every single part of this world, and that is the same refrain. Where you get her from? But I remind them in the words of Plastic Bag, she's not going anywhere. It is here she intends to stay. And when it rise or it fall, she ain't even about here at all, at all, at all. That is the Prime Minister you have. And I want you all to understand that the travel redounds to the benefit of each one of you. The travel redounds to the benefit of Barbados. I want you to understand that when the Prime Minister goes to travel, for instance, in my ministry, that I'm able to secure I buy a fence up at Paragon because the people from Jeff, the Global Environment Facility, they have a strong confidence, an unequivocal confidence in the work of Barbados and in terms of our biodiversity. And they said to us, we will give you the money as a grant so that you can build back up biodiversity. The same Jeff has said to us, for our Scotland district and our natural rehabilitation, we will give you money so that the NHD could do their work in the Scotland district. Those are the things. Look at the coastal development. Look at the Barbados Environmental Sustainable Fund. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say that we are on the right path. We are on the path of success as a country. Listen to me very carefully. It is your very determination. It is your unequivocal sinew. It is your walking the walk with us that will allow Barbados to not only rise, but to be the champion in the Western Hemisphere. Ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful evening. God bless. I thank you.
You know how all the big rappers has got their hype man? They be there rapping and thing. That's my hype man. Thank you, Adrian. I just want to recognize the Speaker of the House of Assembly, Comrade Arthur Holder. Where is he? And the Honorable Member for St. George South, my good friend, Dwight Sutherland. And while we're there, will the driver of X6960 please move your vehicle? The police ask you, please come and move your vehicle. It's blocking something. So please go and move it. Finally, I want to recognize the presence of my good friend, the Honorable Member for Christchurch. What? Christchurch? The real member for Christchurch East Central. The Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Comrade Ryan Strawn. Just by way of a brief introduction, because we have to chip along now. And also cruising in now is the Honorable Member for St. George North, Tony Moore. We all recognize that our Prime Minister has been representing Barbados in an unparalleled fashion across the world. She is perhaps the most recognized leader that the Caribbean has ever had. We accept that. We understand that. We understand that our Prime Minister, Mia Amor Motley, has propelled Barbados from being simply a small island in the Caribbean to being a global voice in the area of climate change and climate crisis. We acknowledge this. The reason that she has been able to do all of that and to go out there pushing Barbados, pushing the British Tongue Agenda, bringing the small and developing states to the fore, representing our interests on an international stage, negotiating best treaties and best loans for us. The reason she's been able to do all of that is because she has this man in her corner. Oh. Ryan Strawn is the night watchman who comes in at number 3 and has made the number 3 position his own. Ryan Strawn is one of the best ministers of finance that we have ever had. Ryan Strawn is responsible for a lot of our economic policies. Ryan Strawn is responsible for a lot of the programs that were put in place to save the dollar and bring back economic prosperity to Barbados. Ryan Strawn is that genius back there who twiddles the numbers. When he comes to cabinet, he starts to talk. Half of us don't even understand what he's saying, but we say, yeah, Ryan, do your thing. Yeah, Ryan, go for it. I want to introduce my good friend and the honorable member for the constituency of Christchurch East Central, Ryan Strawn.
Good evening, comrades. Let me say that Wilfred is really phenomenal, and I mean that because all of you are well aware that. Hello? Yeah, yeah. All of you are well aware, yeah, that's better, that just short of 6 years ago when we took office, the South Coast was in a mess. And all of us, all 30 of us, endeavored to execute what we refer to as a mission-critical agenda. And Wilfred, not single-handedly because he was leading a team of people, but day and night, day and night, day and night, Wilfred Abrams worked not just for the people of Christchurch South, no, South, South. Not just for the people of Christchurch, because all of us avoided going down the South Coast because the sewage was flowing in the streets. All of us determined that we had to solve that problem. And it is that commitment, that strength, that leadership that the Honorable Prime Minister pulled us all together as a team and said, we have to solve this problem for the benefit of not just people living in Christchurch South and Christchurch, but for all of Barbados. And that is the kind of commitment that I know that this party has been able to demonstrate to the people of Barbados, that when the chips are down, we will come together and we will find the people who are prepared to go out there and work on behalf of ordinary Barbadians. And I can say that for Wilfred, I can say that for Medic, I can say that for William, I can say that for Kay, and all the rest of the members here this evening. Long nights, and as you know, right now, I'm here. But as Wilfred said, the numbers got to get put together, which we were doing all weekend. And to the extent that all of us make sacrifices, not just with our families, but certainly within the constituency, because when national duty calls, it is not for Ryan Strawn or Wilfred Abrams or Medic or Kay McConney or Doggett or any of the MPs in here or the senators. It is for the people of this country. And so I say simply, Barbados Labour Party comrades this evening, as we do all the time. Somebody said to me yesterday, you got some trouble in the camp. I said, well, if I accept the premise of the statement, then technically trouble is out of the camp. So I say to this party, we will do that which we always do. We now have a vacancy for a candidate for the Barbados Labour Party for Christchurch South. That is the nature of what's happened. And so whilst I know that the country, and I want to make this point very clearly, we have committed to staying the course on behalf of the people of this country. And we will continue to ensure that not just from a policy perspective, but certainly, as you know, politics takes on a different dynamic at these times. And we will come to the people as we have this evening, and we will continue to do as we've been doing from the get-go, to let Barbadians appreciate and understand that we will simply assemble a team that will continue the good work that we've already started, Because under the leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister, as you would appreciate, imagine that we are facing all these challenges and now you have to deal with this. So we can deal with it, you know. We can deal with it. But I'm saying to the people of Barbados that the Barbados Labour Party, our record over the last nearly 6 years, from the mission critical agenda that we set out and we achieve, to the response to COVID, the response to the ash, the response to the hurricane, the response to the wars, this party got your back. And it's got your back. And so, comrades, and I say specifically to the people of Christchurch South in particular, fear not. Fear not. Because this party, as we did just short of 6 years ago in St. Michael West, we found the right candidate, and we shall do that again. And therefore, you must be aware of the seriousness with which this party deals with these matters, because we believe that representation matters. And I know that obviously it's going to take some time to get it resolved, but at the end of the day, time to get it resolved meaning the next election, unless something strange happens in between. But be that as it may, be that as it may, this party is committed. We shall stay the course. And I know that we don't have a lot of time this evening because we are trying to skip it along very quickly, but I can say to Barbadians, the numbers will add up. We will execute the mandate that the people elected us to do. We will continue to consult. We will continue, and you're going to have disagreements, and there will be disagreements. People protesting for things that don't even exist, but they say they want freedom. They're in the city protesting. Nobody checking for them, you know. Nobody checking for them, but they want freedom. It is the most bizarre thing that one could ever imagine. You are protesting and saying that you want freedom. The two things don't mesh. They don't mesh. But this government, this Barbados Labour Party, we shall remain grounded. We will stay with the people. And as I see my colleague here from St. George North, she knows clearly what is ahead. Because there are some of this country who will have us believe that people who make sacrifice should be taken advantage of. And this government is a Labour Party. I say no more. Comrades, I thank you. Continue to give your support to your MPs, to the branches, and make sure that in staying the course, we assemble a team that is fit for purpose, fit for the times, and be able to transform this country. Thank you very much. Good evening.
Allow me just to say this before I ask the Honourable Member for Christchurch West to come and introduce the Prime Minister. Christchurch East has always had an exceedingly strong relationship with Christchurch South. When I first came to Christchurch East, a lot of people, they saw our branch meetings, I swore, belonged to Christchurch East, but they had belonged to Christchurch South. When they do things, we support them. When we do things, they support us, right? We are one family. It's an illusory road that divides half of Christchurch East from Christchurch South, with family on either side of the road. So this is really one big constituency that for the control of numbers has been divided into two. So Christchurch South, hear me clearly. At some point in time, somebody will be chosen to run for Christchurch South. But until that time happens, you can count on the support of the entire branch, the executive, and MP for Christchurch East. You are our family. We got your back. Without saying anything further, no. I apparently have a couple more minutes to introduce William. So, I can't leave him short like I left the others. I have known this man since we were at school. William was a prefect at Harrison College. William was a character. He was larger than life. This small William now. Here it is, small William. But I admired William back then for his intellect. William is one of them people who knows everything about everything, right? I cannot believe how much this man reads and how much he knows about all of our ministries, how much he knows about his own ministry. When he was a minister of housing, he did a fantastic job in housing. He's now the senior minister responsible for infrastructure. And the ease with which William transitioned from housing, which Dwight took up and ran with afterwards, but the ease with which William transitioned and moved seamlessly into the control of the entire infrastructure of government, putting all those pieces together was nothing short of amazing. But then, equally, if you knew him, you wouldn't be surprised, because that's William. A jack of all trades and a master of most. So, without further ado, I want to bring my friend, the member for Christchurch West, part of the Christchurch team, the strong, unified Christchurch team, to come forward, say a few words, and then introduce the boss. Introduce the lady that we all know. Introduce the lady who has taken Barbados from here to here and still claiming. Sorry, I appear to be doing the introduction myself. So, William, please.
Good night, good night. How is the Barbados Liberal Party family feeling? It is always great and wonderful to be within the Barbados Liberal Party family. But you know, as I sat there and listened to my colleagues, and as you know, from 2018, the Prime Minister asked me to lead the Christchurch team. And I was proud to lead the Christchurch team. And I want to say I still lead the Christchurch team. And let me tell you, the Christchurch team is very, very strong. It is strong in Ryan Strachan, a top-class Minister of Finance, a man that controls the dollars and the cents too. He looks at every single penny, checks every single number, and make sure that we underspend if possible and do not overspend. Ladies and gentlemen, Ryan Strachan. They're telling me that I have no time left and I have to introduce the Honorable Prime Minister. And in the same way that I lead the Christchurch team, Mia Amor Motley leads the whole of Barbados. Ladies and gentlemen, a lady who has done so much for Barbados, put Barbados on the map, made Barbados shine proud, a lady who has led us to victory after victory, a lady who continues to work hard to bring Barbados to what it is, to continue us on a trajectory that is excellent, a lady who continues to lead us all through. She will continue to be Barbados' best Prime Minister, a Prime Minister who continues to do everything, who has been a tremendous person. Ladies and gentlemen, a lady who I have known for 52 years. And as you know, she will tell you, what you see is what you get. You know Mia, Mia knows you, and Mia has your back, just like how the people of Christchurch have your back. Ladies and gentlemen, help me to bring to this podium the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Amor Motley.
Please, please. Thank you very much. And let me say how good it is to be here this afternoon in Christchurch East. Wilfred, thank you. I have been listening to the beauty of meetings being streamed is that unlike the past when you didn't get to hear, you can very often hear how well your members are performing. And I want to salute all who have spoken this afternoon. Kay, I didn't hear much of you, but I heard the end, and it was very good. Adrian, you continue to ride and surf the waves and to carry us to heights with your enthusiasm and passion on so many things, but your absolute utter commitment to representation of ordinary people. Ryan, I'm sure that everyone heard in your last speech the maturity which I see in you each and every day, and which this country continues to benefit from. And Wilfred's comments were not understated with respect to the manner in which you continue to help us anchor this economy. You cannot care without cash, and the Dems understood that in a very clear way up until 2018. And Wilfred, I thank you for your stepping up to the plate. And it may seem like a small thing to most, but when it matters always, you are there always standing and accounted for. And the last offer that you made to the people of Christchurch South in the interim is one that I'm sure that they appreciate. And I add to that, and I thank you for being selfless in making the offer. But I add to that every other member of the Christchurch team, from the leader of the Christchurch team in the form of William Duguid, whose constituency butts and abounds Christchurch South, to Ryan Strawn in East Central, to Adrian Ford in West Central, and indeed to Wilfred as an anchor, because here in St. Christopher's and right through, you know that were it not for the single application of an imaginary line down the road, that effectively these communities are one, as you indicated. And I say that, therefore, to simply say to you, all is well. And the continued representation that we offer the people of Christchurch South in 2018 and 2022 as a party will continue unabridged and uninterrupted. And I have not much to say on this matter this afternoon. It is unusual for a person to change party once, but it happens. It is rare for a person to change a party twice, but it also happens. But it is almost without comparison to change a party 3 times. And I simply say that at some point, we will be told the reasons. The truth is that this year will be 35 years that Ralph first left the Barbados Labour Party. He ran twice for the Dems. In fact, when he left, he ran for the Dems twice, and he ran for the Barbados Labour Party twice. He lost twice when he ran with the Dems, and he won twice when he ran with the Barbados Labour Party. I can only assume that, therefore, changing parties is easy come easy go. And for many of us, that is not the case. But I assume that not because of my own reading, but because of what I've heard from you in this constituency here in East and South. Because a few weeks ago, I spent a considerable amount of time, Kima would tell you, 4 or 5 hours in Oystons 2 Saturdays ago. And I heard from the people. I heard from you all along. So it is not for us to comment any further. The truth is that none of us can tell you why Mr. Thorne has left. I'm not sure his branch executive can tell us. I'm not sure the Christchurch South branch can tell us. I know that the chairman cannot tell us. I know that the general secretary cannot tell us. And I know that I, as political leader, cannot tell you. Because I have not spoken to him, and he has not spoken to me, nor any of the others, nor the branch executive, nor the branch. So let us give him the opportunity in the dignified way that we know how to do it in the Barbados Labour Party to be able to speak. And when he does, we will better understand what his motivations have been. Suffice it to say that I want to thank him for his service for the people of Christchurch South and the Barbados Labour Party between 2018 and now. I wish him all the very best, and I wish that he finds whatever it is that he's looking for that we do not yet know. But I want us to stay focused. And that is why Ryan's comments this evening were so appropriate. Because we know what we were elected to do. And we have been doing it. And while we have not reached the destination, we are very much still on course, and we are along the way making good distance and satisfying the people who we came to satisfy, that we would do what we asked them to allow us to do. And I don't need to go back and give you all of the history, because you know it better than me. And we have to be careful that people feel that our only interest is stating the record. And the record, while important, does not distract from the mission at hand. And I want us always to remember that, because most people, while they appreciate what we have done, live in the instant now and want to see the future improved. And I give this country and this party the commitment that nothing that will happen will deter this party and this government from remaining focused on making Barbados the best place that we can make it, not for one group, not for 2 groups, not for 3 groups, but for all, because that is why we ask the people of Barbados to elect us. And I refer only to the past as a reflection that when we say to you that we will do X, or we will do Y, or we will do Z, we have done X, Y, and Z. And in some instances, yes, more. And in some instances, it may take a little longer to do things. And in other instances, like when you're refurbishing some of these schools, when you start to take off the roof, what you thought you had to do becomes 3 or 4 times more complex. Because once you start to unravel and look at what is there, then you have to be prepared to be equal to the task and to achieve for the people what we set out to achieve for them. And that is why I am very clear. This party, on the 31st of March, will become 86 years old. But in the 85 years, and in particular, in the last few years, I would like us to recognize that we have worked hard to be equal to the task of both the legacy as well as the needs, and in some instances, the wants of Barbadians. And there are a few things that continue to make life difficult for us because we live in an unstable world. And we know that there are going to have to be changes to a number of the things that we do because we don't have control over everything. We've already started to have the conversation that it is going to be impossible to do major physical works, particularly on roads and drainage, in the rainy season in this country. You all saw it better than anybody else. We lived it. First 6 months of last year, Barbados had half the rainfall that it had in the 30 years average before. Half. And you thought, well, whoa, that can carry us straight into dry season and drought, etc. But then you turn around and then all of a sudden we had more rain and more convection rain. Not necessarily more absolute rain, but because the convection rain is heavy, intense rain in a short period of time, it means that the drains and all of the canals that were there to be able to move water in a leisurely, more gradual way before can no longer be appropriate because of the intensity with which the rain is falling for an hour, and therefore the flooding becomes an immediate issue. And the government hasn't shied away from this reality. The government has said that we will meet to the task of doing roads and doing drainage, and that we may have now to get the country accustomed to the fact, as you are seeing with all the road work going on, that you have, instead of working 8-hour days in the dry season, that you may have to work 12, 14, and 16-hour days depending on the particular job, the particular area of location, and the particular type of equipment being used. Because we have to make hay while the sun is shining. And I tried to express this to the country when I spoke in January as we unfolded the beginning of a new year. And it is because you can't be in the season of superlatives, as I have come to call it, the wettest, the driest, the hottest. Everything is a new record. Every time you turn on the TV or open a newspaper, you hear that it's a new record and that the world that we living in is completely different. And I ain't talking about the world overseas. I'm talking about the ones about here 7 days a week, including Sunday, if you listen to Anthony Hunt. I'm talking about ours. And therefore, it means that some of the things that we would never have tolerated 10 years ago or 5 years ago, we might have to. So if you hear a little heavy noise from the trucks and the milling machines and everything outside at 6 o'clock in the evening or 7 o'clock, we're going to try not to carry it into 9 and 10 o'clock and midnight, but we may have to get accustomed to them working from 6 in the morning till 8 at night as a matter of course. So that we have promised that those things will happen even if we have to make changes. At the appropriate time, as I keep saying, and Dwight will tell you, we've taken longer to get the housing program off the ground than I would have liked. But I'm satisfied that we are almost on track there because what we're doing is putting an industrial process. So we've done quite a few hundred houses, but we have said that we don't want a few hundred houses a year. We want no less than 2,000 houses a year being built in Barbados because we feel the pain of those who had to stay at home and who could not go and get their own house, largely because, one, either they couldn't get mortgages to afford what they're buying, or two, that in some instances, prices have gone way out of control, and that is why the government has said that we will come in to be able to mediate the price of housing, particularly the price of development of services, and the cost of land. Ryan will tell you, and William will tell you, that we've been adamant that particularly where we're dealing with Crown land, to keep the price down because it cannot be fair for people who are police officers, police constables, nursing assistants, teachers, teaching assistants. They have a right to be able to get housing in this country, and we will, as a Barbados Labour Party government, make sure it happens for them. But if we work at the end of our mandate, I would be worried. We are not even halfway into the mandate that the people gave us. So that we understand that take your time and do it well. rather than rushing and doing it badly, as has been the custom in the certain parts of the Democratic Labour Party and George Street that they became accustomed to. I understand. And that is why we have a friend who says that he don't play out-of-season football and out-of-season cricket. Well, neither do I. You understand? And this party will stay focused on getting the job done. This cabinet will tell you that very often I have said, yes, I confess to being a hard taskmaster, because I know what we have asked you, the people, to allow us to do. They're laughing. I am grateful for all that they do, because I am conscious that this cabinet and the cabinets that we have had since 2018 have been asked to do more than almost any other cabinet in the history of post-independence Barbados, or I can even say post-1937 Barbados. Because we have had to confront challenges, both global and local, large in scale, small. Because when you deal with the individual matters that face one of your constituents, Wilfred, it may not be a large matter to other people. But when you have a lady who, for whatever reason, she and her husband break up, can't go back there, got to go home by her mother to live with the 3 children, the mother working, she working too. Who taking care of the children? Who gonna make the choice as to who staying home to take care of the children? 3 of them that all under the age of 11. And if you don't have family or somebody else in the district, one of the 2 of them gonna make the sacrifice. Not true? So that when I say that we focus from the very small to the very large, that is what we have had to do. And we will continue to do it. And there are some things that are simply beyond our control. The climate is beyond our control, but we know how to adapt to it. And that is what we're trying to do, to make the changes where we can make the changes, so that the people who are the victims of it can stop being the victims of the excessive rainfall, of the flooding, of the droughts. That's our job, and we accept it willingly. And we are happy to continue to deliver for the people of Barbados. We do so conscious too, because I hear all this talk going about how this is the greatest level of taxation and that we have done more to make people unhappy. Ryan, you hear all the talk that they're trying. People like to construct fiction and call it facts. Now both begin with the letter F. But in case they butt it with another letter F, they need to get back on the right track. But it's true. Because what we have before us is a situation where this government, in spite of coming in and finding the situation where we found it, in spite of it, took a position that we would seek to be able to put money back in people's pockets. There is only one thing that we said in 2018 that we would do that we have not done, and that is because we had to change around how we deal with the revenue. There's only one thing. But Ryan can tell you that when we got to 2019, everybody forget it, you know. We unfolded a level of tax reform and putting money back into people's pockets that we have not taken back, with the one exception of corporation taxes. And even in corporation taxes, while we have carried it back up to 9%, it is significantly lower than the 28% and the 30% that it was accustomed being before this Barbados Labour Party took office in May 2018. People who draw reverse tax credit, people were only getting that up to $18,000 a year, in other words, $1,500 a month. But we turn around and said, no, all who get in and drawing $2,000 and change, $2,080 I think it is a month or less, we can give you the reverse tax credit too. The $1,300, right? The 1,300. No government ever give you that. This government did it in the middle of an IMF program, in the middle of COVID. We did not take it back. In the middle of all of the other geopolitical crises that we face, a hurricane, a freak storm, a ashfall, all of which added hundreds of millions of dollars in expenditure onto the government. And we ain't come back and asked nobody earning $2,080 a month to stop receiving the $1,300 reverse tax credit. I go further. People earning between $2,080 and just shy of $3,000 a month. We say pay your taxes, and at the end of the year, I can give you back the Ministry of Finance. Yes, this gentleman here can give you back every single cent that you're paying taxes, so long as we have the cash flow and the capacity to afford it. We gave it back in 2020 in the height of COVID. We gave it back in 2021 in the height of COVID. We gave it back coming out of the shadows of COVID in 2022. We gave it back here the other day in 2023. And God speed, so long as this year goes as we expect it to go, you can get it back this year again. And everybody earning above $3,000 a month, up to the very highest, everybody got a tax cut as well. And let's deal with the people who own houses and properties. In the middle of all of this last year, what did we do? Nobody is paying land tax in Barbados whose house is valued for less than $300,000 in the property. Nobody. And more so, everybody who pays land tax residentially gets the first $300,000 tax-free now, and they never got it before under any government in this country. But you can hear on the call-in programs when the day comes that this is the most taxed government. You in the Labour Party have a right to get up and defend the record, the facts, not the fiction. Rely on the right F. The facts, not the fiction. And I say to you today that if you even look at the tax effort, there was a time, Ryan, when our tax effort was 28 and 29%. Not true? It is down now, last year, 22, 23. Year before, at the end of the last fiscal year, to 25.4%. 25.4%. And I challenge anybody. In fact, I've gone further. I've said to Ryan and them, please do some scenarios and show the country and make the scenarios available. Because the only thing to explode fiction is facts, and put the facts in the people's hands. But I go further. You saw us come from as far back as the last 2-3 years when inflation started to become a problem in this country. And you heard us say that we would do a number of things. In early 2022, we froze the freight cost, the taxation on goods being imported into Barbados, and we said use December 2019 figures. Not true, Ryan? December 2019. All the facts that containers went up to $20,000 from $5,000, we say ignore all of that. Because if not, the people will end up carrying additional taxes in the cost of everything they're buying. We turn around and we ensure that we cap, and that is still the case today, VAT on the importing of oil. And said that if the price of oil goes above $80 a barrel, which it has on many occasions in the last 2 years, that the government of Barbados will not take any additional taxation. You forget that. They forget it. And we turn around as well and we cap the VAT on the first 150 kilowatts of electricity for everybody in this country. Now, who is the people that use mostly 150 kilowatts and less? Ordinary working class people. But we didn't stop there. We met with the private sector and got the private sector to agree to a compact for 2 6-month periods. And even when the compact closed, when I spoke to you at annual conference last year in St. Lucie, I told you that we would and had reached an arrangement with respect to chicken, which continues to be the case. But the minister, Lisa Cummins, spoke on Friday, and for those who didn't hear, I can repeat some of it, because this country needs to distinguish between fact and fiction. And a handful of people who have been given the opportunity to have free reign on radio without any kind of challenge or filter, thank you, need now to get the facts. And Lisa, I beg you, I tell you, yes, and a little bigger for me to read. But you don't make me show my age and take off my glasses to read. And you are, thank you. And you are going to be patient because you are going to get facts and not fiction. And you need to know that if it takes a little while for me to go through the list, you are going to get facts and not fiction. It starts with chicken, Amir's Halal Chop Mix. We, and the prices that we're using as the reference point, are the prices that existed in July 2022 before the compact. Is that not true, madam? Before the compact. The price of that was $19.99 per kilogram. Today, and the prices I'm giving you are January 19th prices, and I've asked them to keep updating it every month for the public. You can go by Cherish and get that at $17.95. There is one supermarket for the price that is over. Let's go to Bajan Pride flour. $6.99 for 2 kilogram pack back in 2022. You can go now to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 supermarkets. Savings Plus, Popular Discount, Massey, Cherish, Jordan's, Chanel, and get it for less. $6.65, $6.99, $6.65, $6.49 at Popular, $6.89 at Savings Plus. Let's go to the next one. Bajan chicken whole, $20.30 per kilogram, sorry, $13.99 per kilogram before. And that now is being affected by what we said and put in place last year. Let us go to honey. Honey wasn't in there before we put it in the compact when the government reduced the VAT on a number of food items. You forget that? Honey now, $20.30 it was for a 12-ounce bottle in 2022. You can get it at $19.35 at Chanel. You can get it at $15.49 at Massey. You can get it at $16.45 at Roxy. You can get it at $19.95 at Trimart. You want to go now to sardines in oil, 106 grams, $3.15 before in July 2022. You can get it at $2.65 at Chanel, $2.69 at Cherish, $3.19, little more at Eddie's, $2.69 at Jordan's, $2.99 at Lionel C. Hill, $2.89 at Massey, $3.06 at People's Mart, $2.49 at Popular, and $2.99 at Savings Plus, $2.65 at Trimart. You want me to keep going? Tuna, 5-ounce tin, $3.45 before, $3.20 now at A1, $2.99 at Cherish, $3.25 at Eddie's, $2.99 at Jordan's, $3.36 at Lionel C. Hill, $2.95 at Massey, $3.38 at People's Mart, and go down the line. Chow mein, 340-gram package It was $3.15 in July 2022. It is now 320 at, sorry, let me get it, 305 at A1, 299 at Cherish, and 319 at Savings Plus. Let us go and deal with toothpaste. Toothpaste beforehand, 4 ounce regular, $4.65 in July 2022. You can get it at $3.59 at Cherish. Let us deal with the toothbrush, because the toothpaste is not good if you can't get your toothbrush. A classic medium one. I like the soft end up with the medium. $2.99 in July 2022. You can get it at $2.85 now at A1. You can get it at $2.65 at Massey and $2.56 at People's Mart. And I got 2 supermarkets that carry it at $3.99 and $4.80. You know where to find yourself. Look, roll on. Nobody don't want to smell bad. Dove, $4.10 in July 2022 before the compact. Today, you can get it at $3.75 at A1. You can get it at $3.69 at Massey. You can get it at $3.95 at Savings Plus, and I got one selling it at $5.55. I can tell the good and the bad. Especially when people need the toilet tissue. And they need a lot of it certain places. $6.65 was the price in July 2022. You can get it at $6.25 at A1, $6.29 at Cherish, $5.99 at Popular. Do you understand the trend of what I'm saying? And I can be straight. The one thing, bleach has gone up. A gallon of bleach was $7.39 before. The cheapest you can get it for now is $7.99. And it has gone in some instances to $8 and $9 in some areas. The other thing that has gone up, Stay Free Maxi regular wings. They keep doing that to women all the time. It used to be $3.65. The cheapest you can get it now is $4.50. And we will have to deal with that because once again, this government took off taxes off of sanitary items for women and for people in this country. Because it's not only about what you eat, but we understand that a person's dignity is affected by how they feel about themselves, which extends to sanitary issues and hygiene. The other thing that has not gone down is split peas. Split peas, and I can tell you straight, start growing some peas. When I was growing up, my grandmothers, both of them grew peas in the backyard. Up to the other day at Christmas, you see everybody shelling peas. Don't only shell peas at Christmas, you can shell peas every month. The other thing that has not gone down is black-eyed peas. And clearly this is a problem globally and not just in Barbados with respect to peas. Okay? Evaporated milk and 2% milk, those are the other things that have not gone down. And the truth be told, we have to meet now with the dairy industry because we're going to have to give them some support. But even with that, the reality is that a lot of those prices in some instances may be beyond our control for different elements of those things. My friends, I can go on and on. It's just a long list. But I have insisted that the Ministry of Commerce not just bring this list to Cabinet, but publish it. Because it has to see the light of day and the oxygen. And Barbadians will begin to understand that when we have tried, therefore, to be able to contain prices on basic things that every household needs. They ain't going for the fancy cheeses. What you will find in here is cheddar cheese, and that price has gone down too. We ain't going for the fancy nuts. We ain't going for no fancy cuts of meat. We've gone for the things that every Barbadian household needs. And we have tried, and we will continue to try our best. Last year, the Bridgetown Port reduced the charges on 20-foot containers or equivalents down by 10%. And the 1st of February, thank you, the 1st of February this year, last week, they reduced it by another 7.5%. Now, when everybody else is increasing their fees, this government made it clear from day one that stevedoring was a cost that we should not be paying for in 21st century Barbados. It was a colonial and old-time hangover where you pay somebody to be a middleman. You don't need a middleman, because all it's doing is increasing your prices on everything coming through the port. And we gave them and said, look, we will give you 2 years to adjust yourself. 2 years end us up in COVID. So we understand. And we gave them extra time. By last year, the time was over, 2023. Now, I am concerned as to whether some have not tried to increase their prices so as not to pass on to the consumer. And I give you the assurance that this government will monitor those things, because there has been clear fluctuation in some prices. And what we need to demand as a people, not just the government, is that when prices go up, we understand that you may have to carry up. But when prices come back down, what you got to do? Bring it back down for the benefit of the consumer too. And that is why the importance of choice is there. And that is why the Ministry of Commerce setting out the 8 or 9 major supermarkets and the prices that you can get these basic things for is critical. It will cost us money. A whole page ad costs about what? $5,000, $6,000 nowadays. And you're going to have to probably do it portrait, because if you give them that small font that you give me there just now to read, a lot of people ain't going to be able to read it. And they still won't be able to tell fact from fiction. But we are going to have to spend that money every month in the major newspapers to give Bajans, and on social media, to give Bajans the facts. Now, if this was a government that was hiding from the truth, Horace, you think we would be doing any of these things? But we believe that while we cannot control all of our environment, we can work to contain it, and we can work to minimize the impact that it has on people. And when we have done all that we have done, not a cent come back out of your pocket in taxes back to us. Now, there will be times, and I talk straight, when you may have to adjust fees. Because the fees have not been adjusted for 10, 15, 20 years. In some instances, we went through it with the transport bus fares. And who were the biggest people calling for the fee increases? It wasn't even Transport Board. Who it was? The ZRs and the minibus men. Because they knew what it was to have to live on the same fare for over 15 years without change when the price of gas and diesel went up. The taxi men did not have an increase in taxi fares in this country. The whole of the last government administration went through the entire period and no taxi fares. Public servants, 2 wage increases in 6 years, 5 years, and the last government barely gave 1 in 10. In the middle of COVID, when everybody told us not to do it, we said you cannot treat people badly as workers. And if people have been acting in a job for 3 years, good Lord, you can't confirm them. If you didn't mean to confirm them, don't let them act for them 3 years. And this government went to Parliament and passed a law. My ministry quarreled with me and fought with me and said, but Prime Minister, there are going to be problems. I said, if there are problems, put an appellate mechanism to fix it. And thank God we put the appellate mechanism with the President, and thank God the President did over 900 appeals, and over 3,000 Barbadians benefited from that piece of legislation with the appointments being confirmed. I want you to connect the dots. In the middle of the same COVID, when they told us that we could not do minimum wage legislation, I was a member of Owen Arthur's cabinet before, when he was literally assaulted and told he could not do minimum wage. And I'm sorry that Colin Jordan isn't here, but I want to salute him. And I want to salute the member for St. George North and the Barbados Workers Union too. Because when we sat down and decided we were going to approach minimum wage legislation, it was not done in a cavalier way to hurt anybody or to lick up anybody. It was done in a sober way. And we have now for the last 3 years seen minimum wage legislation in this country, and the country has not fallen down like London Bridge. It has not fallen down. But the people who benefit, the people who knew what it was to be earning $6 and $7, now benefit from $8.50 an hour and understand the importance of what this government did in the middle of the most difficult times that this country has ever seen. Are you seeing the connection? You increase wages. You increase and put in a minimum wage system. You appoint people. You say stop the bad behavior and bad treatment. And I come now in a very reflective and sober way to what we will deal with this week. Because some people want to make it some boogeyman and some fearful factor. But in 1949, the International Labour Organization, and I thank Chad Blackman for joining this cabinet, his last post was as special advisor of the International Labour Organization's Director General. Barbados has been central to that organization for decades. Decades, even before we were independent. In 1949, they passed a convention that said that if you are going to get the benefit of government contracts, that you have to treat workers to a basic minimum standard. They weren't talking about bonuses and high level. They say you can't go below. You know what below mean? On the floor. That there must be a floor, a minimum. You could treat them better. You could treat them even best. But you can't treat them worse. At the same time that they passed that convention, with every convention in the ILO, they also do something called a recommendation. The conventions are binding. The recommendations are guidance. In other words, we're not asking you to make it binding, but we're begging you to consider it. They passed a recommendation in the same 1949 that not only should it be government contracts like the convention, but you should look at subsidies and utilities. In 1952, under the leadership of this party's founder leader, Grantley Adams, the Parliament of Barbados passed that legislation, and it became known as the Labour Clauses Public Contracts Act. We never passed the recommendation, and for decades, because most people respected the basic tenets, it was, for the most part, respected across all who benefited from government contracts, all who benefited from all kinds of subsidies and concessions. Lady St. John was here earlier. When I was a young MP, Bree St. John, for those who are old enough, used to sit next to me on the front bench as a former prime minister. I was the youngest, so I get put at the end. And Bree called me out today. He said, Motley, come. And we went outside. He said, young girl, let me tell you something. And he looked back in there, and he pulled the curtain. He said, you see down in there? A day can come in here when you're going to have to pass legislation to guarantee people's behavior. I said, what do you mean, Sir Harold? He said, well, when people start to have different influences and values, you cannot assume that people will do things by convention or by custom anymore, because people have been influenced in different ways. And he said that a time is going to come in this country when you are going to have to legislate and codify a lot more things that we have taken for granted to do by custom. In some instances, we know it well, that there are certain things that you don't need to tell people in your household Somebody come to visit the house, you understand? And you see an elder person come into the room, what do? You stand up and you offer them the chair. You understand? But there are some people for whom that is anathema. They ain't gonna do it. And you see the difference in values evolve before us in our homes, in our schools, in our workplaces, in our parliament. Things that you could not do before, say before. People do and say now. I've been in public life now for over 35 years this year. When I first got nominated, 35 years in July. That's how I remember Ralph's date so well. The bottom line is that what has happened within our tourism sector and our hotel sector in particular is that different investors have come in from different parts of the world. And in a very large sense, what has happened is that they bring practices that don't necessarily belong to the Barbadian way, but that they do it because technically they can get away with it. So that there are hotels not far from here that got into the practice of giving people 6-month contracts. Now tell me where you going with a 6-month contract to get any kind of assistance, Reggie, for your family. You can't go to get hire purchase. You can't go and buy a car. You can't go anywhere at all. And therefore, what you are doing is living week to week and month to month for argument's purposes. Similarly, there have been other practices that have creeped in that are not part of Barbadiana. And all this government has said is that in the wisdom of Sir Harold and others before him, we recognize that we may now need to codify the very same recommendation that was provided to us as guidance in 1949. Now let me give you the facts. This government has inherited obligations from every government that went before. And that is right as it should be, because the government is a continuum. But in inheriting those obligations, the level of tax expenditures, concessions, is in the vicinity, Ryan, of what, $750 million? And the majority of it is underpinning what drives this economy. Predominantly tourism, capital works in there, some manufacturing, some agriculture. But you and I both know that agriculture as a percentage of production in this country has gone what? Much smaller than it was 50 years ago. You and I both know that manufacturing is not what it was in the heyday when St. John was Minister of Industry in the early 80s, when you had Intel and all the garment factories and all of those all about the country, you remember? And it's largely because Barbados cannot compete on high volume, low value manufacturing because we have a fixed exchange rate, which we all want to keep stability and predictability of prices in the country, and equally that we also have higher labor costs than most countries in the region. In a small country, we have been able to keep the disparity between those who have and those who do not have to a much smaller margin than in most countries in the entire hemisphere. And that is no mean achievement. But the country is small. And if you don't keep doing that, where are you going to run and hide? Where are you going to go and hide? So that coming back to the point, if you are getting the benefit, and look at government's revenue. Government's revenue is coming in at about $3.2 billion. So if you are effectively giving away $750 million, some of these concessions go back to Errol Barrett and Tom Adams' time. Not true, right? So this is a continuum. And all the government is saying that these are subsidies. a concession is a subsidy. And that if you are going to get a subsidy from the taxpayers, and we are not going to be able to spend that money directly on the very same taxpayers, then you have a duty to treat them fairly and to make sure that there is a floor, a minimum, below which you do not go. Now, I've heard all the things about we about to turn off investors and all of that. That is nonsense. It is utter nonsense. Because invariably, the consultation which is taking place is also taking place against the backdrop that the hotel industry has a voluntaristic model because of our industrial relations that has seen the collective bargaining agreement between the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association and the Barbados Workers Union be that floor effectively for the last 40, 50 years. 60 years? 60 years. So that the government is doing nothing that has not existed for the last 60 years. The only thing we are doing is putting it in law. And we are putting it in law because we are satisfied that a signal to all is sufficient. And a word to the wise is sufficient. That you cannot tell me that simply adhering to this collective bargaining agreement that has existed for 60 years is going to unfair you and throw you over. And why? If you need to be lower than that floor to be competitive or profitable, it means that you are doing it on the backs of labor, on the backs of ordinary working people, and in a country where we have known what it is to have people be the source of people's profit through exploitation. It cannot be acceptable in an independent Barbados for us to agree that any worker must now be able to fuel on their own by their underpayment or undertreatment the competitiveness or the profitability of any hotel in this country. That is all the government is saying. And the government, therefore, we have met with the BHTA, I met with them and the Minister of Labour and the Minister of Tourism 2 Thursdays ago. We met with the Barbados Employers Confederation and the Barbados Private Sector Association. They wrote me Friday night. I got it at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. I agreed to meet them at 9 o'clock, 9:30 the Monday morning. In every instance, we have been responsive. And tomorrow morning, I will meet with them yet again at 10 o'clock. Why? Because we're not looking to pick fights with anybody, but we are looking to do as we say and do as we believe. That you cannot use the unfair treatment of workers to be able to be competitive or profitable in the hotel industry in this country. And I hope that I've explained it very clearly and without emotion, because it is important that this country does not reverse the gains and to not see people and to not hear people and to not feel people when the one thing that has distinguished Barbados and given us our development in the post-1930s era, and certainly from 1944 when Grantley Adams first won, has been the ability to see people, feel people, and hear people. Do you know how many countries do not have holiday with pay legislation? Do you know how many countries do not have the suite of labor legislation that Grantley Adams brought in the 50s or that Colin Jordan and others are trying to do, or even the Social Security that Grantley started and Errol Barrow put in place in 1967? Do you know how many countries do not pay for children to have free education from pre-primary to tertiary? Do you know how many countries people can't go into a polyclinic or a hospital and get basic service? Or they can't even get accident and emergency service properly? Do you know And this government has said, and we have seen it, when COVID came and the restrictions were put on people, you couldn't go outside between this hour and that hour, you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that, not just in Barbados, the world over. It almost seemed like it didn't happen. It's far in your mind now. But when COVID finished, the one thing that I have noticed, not just locally, but internationally, is that once people got back the agency of movement, all of a sudden, they wanted now to claim everything. They wanted to regain their power and their freedom. And in the UK, week by week, month by month, strikes. In the United States of America, companies that would not even allow a person to spell UNION in the plants, all of a sudden now got unions. Starbucks, Amazon, a whole host of companies that were part and parcel of this neoliberal Washington consensus perspective, that those things were old school. You don't need them. Well, we did the opposite. And we said no. We passed minimum wage legislation and we appointed people at the very time when people weren't seeing people. But we're not foolish, because the other piece of information that I'm going to share with you now, and I mentioned it in the address to the country at the beginning of the year, but I didn't delve into it. One of the hardest periods of time that I had in this country as Prime Minister was deep in 2020, in the summer of 2020, when COVID was around and the country had been shut down from virtually the end of March. And the hoteliers clearly, unfortunately, were getting no revenue because the airport was closed too. The severance payments legislation made it clear that the workers would then be entitled to severance. And under the legislation, while the hotels could claim back a portion from the severance payments fund, they first had to pay, and secondly, they carry a portion themselves. And they came to me, and to the Minister of Tourism, and to the chairman of the National Insurance Scheme, who ironically is the current Minister of Tourism. And they said to us, Prime Minister, we have a problem. And if we don't amend the Severance Payments Act, if you don't amend it, our hotels will become bankrupt. It is bad enough that they are closed, because we know what happens in the heat when you close buildings. The tiles blow. The pipes stop working. And then you're going to have to conduct a dilapidated survey. And that dilapidated survey will mean that we will have to find more money on top of what we don't have and what we've already lost. And we said, we hear you, but this is not our rights alone that we would be amending. If we amend the Severance Payments Act, you will be taking away property from the workers of this country, because the legislation vests in the workers the right to receive those funds. It is true that when that legislation was passed, no one contemplated a pandemic. And indeed, the last kind of pandemic that the world had seen that was global was 1918 to 1920, a good 49 years. In fact, more. 49 years before the National Insurance Scheme was even established in this country. And we therefore had to start meeting with the unions and the workers. And it took us weeks of back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Some days it was hot beyond measure. Some days we didn't even think we would get to make it. And it wasn't only the hotels that would be in trouble. The government severance payments fund may not have gone bankrupt, but it would have become totally unstable. And with perseverance and persistence, and with using the mantra that this government used from day one of our election in 2018, from the very first budget that took place 2 weeks after we were elected, share the burden, share the bounty. Share the bounty, share the burden. In other words, all of us are in this together. The workers, without capital building hotels and without the hotels being able to open, would not have jobs. The hotels, without workers, and everybody learned this in COVID, that there were no high-level skills nor low-level skills, because if the people weren't going out to clean the garbage during COVID, when the restrictions were on, what would have happened to the country's public health otherwise? If the people weren't going to pack the supermarket shelves to allow you to go and risking, and many of the people who went to pack supermarket shelves going back into households with mothers and fathers in the vulnerable population, so that everybody had a stake. And I have watched from President Obama, former President Obama, and others in the last few years, 2 years, reflect on these changes that we are seeing globally, and reflect on the fact that more than ever there's a resurgence in unionism, largely because of the fact that people had rights taken away from them because of the public health emergency in the interest of all. I say to you, my friends, that I am proud to lead this party. And I am proud, more importantly, to share the philosophy that Grantley Adams shared when he formed this party with the others with whom he formed it. And that philosophy said, early on, from the time that we were in a government with cabinet government in the early 50s, after universal adult suffrage and the franchise was extended to all, that one of the first sets of things done by the Barbados Labour Party was to take care of the rights of the workers of Barbados who had been ignored for almost 340 years up until then. Let's be straight. Even the ones who are now owners of capital and managers, 95% of us came through that route, and you hear me use the word us, all of us. Some may have gotten on the train a decade or 2 or 3 earlier than others. But I can assure you that all of us within the last century were pretty much in the same boat. And for us to believe that you can kick down a ladder and allow a few people to continue to spoil, because the majority of hoteliers are not doing bad, but you have a few who want to spoil that, then the way to deal with it is to, as Sir Harold St. John taught me 30 years ago, is to recognize that there is legislation to be able to inform behavior and to be able to constrain behavior. When Tom Adams wanted to promote solar water heating in this country, he gave tax incentives. When Tom Adams wanted to promote savings in this country, he gave tax incentives. So that the notion of using legislation to shape behavior in a country, when we want to tell people stop using the sugary drinks, what have we done? We use taxation as well, which is through legislation. And for the persons who are worried, this has nothing to do with taxi drivers or water sports operators or all of the other bogeymen. Last year, March, when I realized what was happening in the budget speech, go back and listen, I said that we are having problems in this country because this other thing that came to mind was when we shut down the country in December 31st, 2020, for 4 months to April. Can you remember when we opened it back up in April, you ashfall come, and the people say we had a deal. We had a deal with the Almighty. You remember how Barbadians responded to tourists and tourism in them first 2-3 months of 2021? You remember that there was a big hullabaloo and cry out against tourism? So that I said to the country in March last year, in my view, there needs to be a colloquium between the workers, a fancy word that the workers said they didn't like. So I said, make it a conversation. A conversation between the workers and the owners and managers of hotels. Because it was clear to a blind man on a trotting horse. And the other thing that has happened, that not only was there a problem, but a number of the hotel workers did not go back into hotel employment. Now you have to ask yourself, what has happened to reduce those numbers? And all I said is go and have the conversation. And I asked my Minister of Tourism to do it. Well, it took a few months for them to have the conversation. But the conversation started in earnest in the beginning of September. October, November, December. You understand that for 4 months the conversation has been going on? You understand too that the Minister of Tourism has actually, on a parallel track, met with some of the hotels that were causing particular problems. But all he can do at this stage is to try to persuade. And therefore the government reached a situation when he, in dealing with the unions and the BHTA, said, look, let us put this in place, and we may have to move from a voluntaristic arrangement to one that is anchored by law. Now, my friends, why have I spent the time this evening talking to you about this? Because this is the closest time that we will come to a stage where we have to defend workers in the way that Grantley Adams had to defend workers in the 1950s. And I pray that we can do so as a country in the same way that we worked as a country to save the Barbados dollar's value. I pray that we can do so in the same way as a country as we work together to share and save and share the burden for everybody as we went through COVID. In all of these instances, this country is at its best when all from different directions come together in common purpose to achieve national objectives. And the only objective that we are asking us to achieve in this particular instance is to save the conditions that are minimal in the tourism sector so that they are not abused by a few. Last year, without many of you knowing, we went through the same process in the construction sector in this country. There were construction companies that were changing people from being employees and telling them we will only work with you if you are self-employed. Now, when you are self-employed, you have a different relationship with national insurance. You got to look for your own pension. You got to look for a whole host of things. When you get sick, there's a whole change of situation. And this government said, enough is enough. You cannot treat people like that. And Colin Jordan, as Minister of Labour, followed the legislation under the Public Labour Clauses Public Contracts Act, same thing, issued a statutory instrument as a result of having consultations with the private sector and with the workers. That consultation did not choose the highest rates in the construction sector. They went in because it is intended once again to be a minimum set of conditions. Is there anybody in this room that has not understood what I have just said? I ain't even talking to the up here. Is there anybody in this room that does not understand what I have just said? And the reason why is that we have not come to set ceilings or higher heights, but we've come to protect the basic minimum. And for those who say, well, carried across, ironically, to the minimum wages, it then ends up actually affecting everybody in a worse way. But all the government is saying that if you are going to benefit from a government contract, and if you are going to benefit from a government concession, treat the workers properly. You understand the tagline? If you are going to benefit from a government contract, if you are going to benefit from a government concession, treat the workers in accordance with the minimum standards. That is it. And I pray, as I said, that this will be a seamless road for all of us. Because the Barbados that I know and the Barbados that I was raised up in is one that has always seen people in its modern incarnation, in a post-independence Barbados. BLP, DLP, the basic thing when it comes to workers' rights, we don't play with. The basic thing when it comes to basic education, and we need to be able to have the conversation about educational transformation, because we may find ourselves in this country with growth and a demand for jobs, and we can't supply the jobs because we don't have the skills among the people. And this is in spite of the fact that K has had for 2 years now, in April or May, it would be 2 years, running Construction Gateway to be able to give people skills. And on top of Construction Gateway, we have been running the other programs for digital and cybersecurity and artificial intelligence to give not just young people, but people who may have lost their job in their 50s and who still feel that they can do something at home, or people who may have to stay at home to take care of their family, but can do something on the computer, can do the training. And in every instance where we've done the training, the percentage of persons who have gotten the jobs has been 100% of those who have completed the training. Because the market is not limited to Barbados, quite frankly. We are doing remote work from Barbados in circumstances where these countries overseas equally do not have enough labor. And therefore, they've come to countries like Barbados and Guyana and elsewhere and said, train some of your people and we will give them the jobs. And all they need is a laptop and good internet service and the requisite training. So my friends, I have come here this evening to share a few conversations with you because there is too much fiction posing as fact. And I want this party and this government to stay focused. We have done good work. We are doing good work. And we will continue to do good work. Not every day will be sunny. Not every day will see perfection. But what we will do every day is give of our best. Because once we give of our best, no one can ask for more. And when we give of our best, not individually, but collectively, and when we continue to do so while seeing people and feeling people and holding on to people and hearing people, while we fight the big battles, but see the small struggles, these are the things that define those who have come to transform this nation, to move it from the 20th century in an analog framework to a 21st century country that can continue to punch above its weight locally, regionally, and internationally, and not be afraid to say the things that we need to say, to speak truth to power. Ryan said it all. None of us have stopped anybody from marching in this country because that is our way. None of us have stopped people from talking. That is our way. The rules of libel and defamation have been there long before the cybersecurity bill and will be there long after, because we live in a world that says that we can live in a society so long as we respect the rights of each other as well. So that if you live next to an asthmatic, Can you be burning bush every day? Simple, simple. And therefore, every right in the Constitution is constrained by your obligations to your fellow man. But you didn't need the Constitution of Barbados to know that. You can go ask Reverend Morris into the Bible, into the good book, and understand that the golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And the Quran and almost every major religion known to mankind speaks to that. But I get it, and I understand that some people need to construct fiction to create following. The F words. And then without fiction, they can't get following. But that is for them to occupy themselves, not us. Because we have mission and we have purpose. And we know what our mission is and we know what our purpose is. And let it be said that while we are not perfect, that we have not at all at any stage dropped the mission that we asked you, the people of Barbados, to elect us to execute. And similarly, we have not in any way abused the mandate given to the people of the Barbados Labour Party in Parliament. At no stage since 2018. Every time, far from abuse it, we now have committees that will take legislation. And it may well be that we may have to send the cybersecurity bill to that committee in order to be able to allow for fuller ventilation. But and we did it with the Child Justice and the Child Protection Bill. But that is what Parliament is for. And while other governments spoke about using committees of Parliament, this is the first one that is using it in a standing committee way on major pieces of legislation. So that there are people in this constituency, Wilfred, that had the opportunity to make their representations to the highest committees of Parliament. And even last week, this is what gets me. When we met with the Barbados Private Sector Association on the same bill, the bill that went to them, and the BEC and the BHTA went to them before coming to Cabinet, because we wanted to facilitate their involvement and input from the very minute the bill was finished by the draftsmen. And they saw something that when they shared it with me, and I saw it, I agreed entirely with them. Because the government's policy was not to include tax refunds, because tax refunds are property. Just like how the workers had property in the severance payments entitlement, a tax refund is your entitlement under the law. So the government removed it immediately. And when they had included national insurance contributions, we removed that too, because the national insurance contribution is not waived. Because the government can't waive national insurance contributions for anybody, because the government is not the national insurance. The national insurance is a tripartite body that is governed by its own legislation. So I say this because sometimes it is important to remind people that we have, far from abusing the mandate, we have gone further to consult on a range of things. And there are things still to come. The Constitutional Reform Commission, the Parliamentary Advisory Reform Commission, the Thorne Commission report, the Hinkson Commission. All of these things have been the subject of town hall meetings and full consultation, and when they come to Parliament, they would have been front-loaded with consultation. In the case of bills, that happens more often than not. There's some initial consultation, but we have said include consultation on the floor of Parliament in subcommittees with respect to substantive issues. And prior to 2018, you couldn't go and listen to estimates and find out what the government's spending money on in any detail. You used to hear a bunch of political speeches in the House every estimates debate. 15-minute political speeches that went to the lowest level more often than not in the last administration. Ad hominem, playing the people instead of playing the ball. This government said no. Let the ministers, the parsecs, the permanent secretaries and the technical officers come in the well of Parliament and answer the questions for what we are spending the people's money to do. You can't want more transparency than that. So when you hear people trying to create fiction, remind them that FA comes before FI, fall into line, let them know. Facts matter. Fiction entertains. And when all is said and done, you can't carry fiction to the supermarket. You can't carry fiction and make it a job. Unless you're a comedian. So my friends, we are not yet at the halfway point. The journey has been rough, but it has been rewarding because we've seen the difference that we've made to the lives of families across this nation. We've seen the difference with which people are prepared to engage this country and to treat this country. You don't have to take my word. Ryan would tell you, and tonight is not a night for that, but you can see the confidence that investors are reposing in the country. You can see the confidence in the credit ratings that we are getting. You can see the confidence in almost everything that is happening. And I ask us, therefore, to stay the course, to get on with the job, and to remember that there is nobody who has told you that the season for work has ended. And I can assure you that whenever the time comes for the season of work to be renewed, you will know and feel it long before I say it. But at this point in time, anything else is but a distraction. Stay focused, get on with the job, and remember why the people of Barbados repose their confidence in us not once, but twice. God bless this party, and God bless all of you. Thank you.
Just have a seat briefly, please. So, I just want, we are very practical people. We live in Barbados, but we live in the world. I know the Super Bowl going on. I know the ladies who want to go and see Usher for the halftime show. So, I am going to invite my good friend William Dugan up to do the vote of thanks. Actually, all the members of the Christ Church team come up. PM, we are your team, so if you will grace us as well, please. We are your team. Your unified team.
And ladies and gentlemen, I just want to thank everybody who contributed, from Khalil Kaftawala, the youth. Please give him a round of applause. Minister Kay McConney on education. Please give her a round of applause. My good friend Adrian Medic-Ford, who got the place rocking. Please give him a round of applause. My good friend Ryan, who told us the facts and made it plain exactly what we need to do and how we need to do it. Please give him a round of applause. And our wonderful leader and Prime Minister, who shared with us her strong vision for this country. We are going forward, unified, collected, and focused. Ladies and gentlemen, and of course, the people of Christ Church East who hosted us, and our host, Mr. Wilfred Abrams, who has shepherded this all the way through. I kept the best for last. Ladies and gentlemen, good night, and God bless you all.
So just so you know, as we do it in Christ Church East, there are refreshments over there. Those who want to go and watch the Super Bowl, go along. For the rest of y'all who want to have a food and a beverage, then we got plenty. So please join us. Thank you very much.